Welcome back to the ACE-CPT exam prep series. This is lesson 10. We're now in the domain of program design and implementation, and today we're getting into resistance training, specifically how to program it and how to progress it safely. Here's what we're really covering: sets, reps, load, and how all of those pieces change as a client moves through the IFT phases. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to look at a client's goal and know exactly how to structure the sets, reps, and rest to match it, and how to move them forward without guessing. Let's look at what you'll be able to do by the end of this lesson. There are 4 objectives. First, you'll be able to list the core resistance training variables, the dials a trainer actually has control over. Second, you'll state the FITT prescription for muscular endurance: frequency, intensity, time, and type, applied specifically to that goal. Third, you'll explain the double progressive training protocol, the method ACE uses to move a client forward safely. And fourth, you'll explain the standard exercise ordering rule, why some exercises come first in a session and others come later. Keep these in mind as we go. Everything in this lesson builds toward being able to design a real, safe resistance training session. Let's zoom out before we get into the details. This lesson takes you from assessment to loaded training, from knowing about a client to actually putting a barbell or a dumbbell in their hands. There are 3 big ideas here. First, training variables: frequency, volume, intensity, tempo, rest, and exercise order. Each one of these drives a different adaptation in the body, so changing one changes the outcome. Second, goal-specific FITT. Muscular endurance, strength, and hypertrophy each use their own prescription. There's no one-size-fits-all rep scheme. And third, the double progressive protocol, the rule for how a client moves forward over time. The short version: add reps to the top of the range first, then add load. Hold on to that double progressive idea. It's one of the most testable concepts in this lesson. Let's break down what we mean by training variables. Resistance training programs are built by manipulating 6 things: frequency, volume, intensity, tempo, rest, and exercise order. Frequency is how often a client trains. Volume is how much work gets done, sets times reps, essentially. Intensity is how heavy the load is relative to what they can lift. Tempo is the speed of each rep. Rest is the recovery time between sets. And exercise order is the sequence those exercises happen in. Here's the key idea to hold on to: changing any one of these variables changes what adaptation the program drives toward. Turn up the reps and lower the load, and you're training endurance. Turn up the load and lower the reps, and you're training strength. Same 6 variables, completely different outcome depending on how you dial them. Now let's get specific and look at the FITT prescription for muscular endurance. This is a table you should be able to reproduce from memory for the exam. Frequency: 2 to 3 days per week. That's enough stimulus without overtraining a client who's often newer to structured resistance training. Intensity: 60 to 70% of maximum resistance. This is a moderate load, not a heavy one. Repetitions: 12 to 16 reps, with fatigue setting in around 75 to 100 seconds into the set. Notice that the guideline isn't just a rep count. It's tied to a time under tension window, too. Sets: 3 to 4. And rest: 1 to 2 minutes between sets, which is shorter than what you'd use for a pure strength goal. Put it all together, and you get a picture of muscular endurance training: moderate load, higher reps, shorter rest. That combination is what builds the ability to sustain effort over time. This is one of the most important concepts in the whole lesson, so let's slow down here. The double progressive protocol is how ACE structures safe, steady progression for a client, and it happens in 2 steps. Step 1, add reps. The client stays at a fixed resistance, and across sessions, they increase their reps up to the top of the target range, as long as their form stays clean. Step 2, add load. Once they're hitting the top of that rep range cleanly, session after session, you increase the resistance by roughly 5%, and then you drop them back down to the bottom of the rep range to start the cycle again. And here's the principle underneath both of those steps. Good form is the gate, not the load. A client grinding out reps with breakdown in technique hasn't actually earned the next progression, even if the number on the rep counter says they did. The form has to be clean before the resistance goes up. That's the test question waiting to happen. Now let's talk about sequencing, the order exercises happen in during a session. The standard rule is this: larger muscle groups and multi-joint exercises get programmed before smaller muscle groups and single-joint exercises. Think about why that makes sense. A squat or a bench press recruits multiple joints and a lot of muscle mass, and it demands the most coordination and the most fresh energy. A bicep curl or a calf raise is a single joint, isolated and far less demanding on the nervous system. So you do the demanding multi-joint work first, while the client is fresh and their technique is sharpest, and save the smaller, single-joint accessory work for later in the session, when a little fatigue matters less. Let's take everything we've covered and put it into a real example. Picture a client whose goal is hypertrophy, muscle growth. Their session is built like this: squat first, then bench press, then single-joint accessory work. Notice the ordering rule from the last slide is already at work here. The big, multi-joint lifts come first, and the smaller, isolated exercises come last. Now, here's an important detail. Within each exercise, the double progressive protocol runs independently. That means this client might be adding reps on the squat this week while adding load on the bench press at the very same time, because each lift moves through its own progression cycle at its own pace. One exercise isn't waiting on another. Progression is tracked per lift, not for the whole workout as a single unit. Let's check your understanding with a practice question. Why must a client's goal be established before setting sets and reps? Here are your options. Option 1, it doesn't matter. Sets and reps are the same for every goal. Option 2, because manipulating training variables differently drives different adaptations. Option 3, because ACE requires assigned goal form before programming. Option 4, because reps and sets are only relevant to cardiorespiratory training. Take a moment to think it through. The correct answer is option 2, because manipulating training variables differently drives different adaptations. Here's why. Changing variables like reps, intensity, and rest changes what physiological adaptation the program drives toward. Sets and reps aren't arbitrary numbers you pick first. They're the tool you use to aim at a specific outcome, so the goal has to come before the numbers. Here's your second practice question. What repetition range is typically prescribed for muscular endurance goals? Your options. Option 1, 1 to 5 reps. Option 2, 6 to 8 reps. Option 3, 12 to 16 reps. Option 4, 20 to 30 reps. Take a moment to think it through. The correct answer is option 3, 12 to 16 reps. Here's why. Muscular endurance programming typically uses 12 to 16 reps at 60 to 70% of maximum resistance. That combination of moderate load and higher rep count is exactly the FITT prescription we walked through a few slides back. So if you remember that table, this question answers itself. Let's recap what we covered in this lesson. Resistance training variables are manipulated based on the client's specific goal. There's no universal rep scheme that works for everyone. Muscular endurance programming typically uses 12 to 16 reps at 60 to 70% intensity, 3 to 4 sets, and 1 to 2 minutes of rest. The double progressive protocol adds reps first, then increases load by roughly 5% once the top of the range is hit with good form. And larger, multi-joint exercises are typically ordered before smaller single-joint exercises in a session. Those 4 ideas are the backbone of this lesson. Know them well because they show up together on the exam. That's a wrap on Lesson 10. In Lesson 11, we're moving into cardiorespiratory training, programming, and progressions. We'll cover programming within each cardio phase, how interval progression works, and the 10% rule for safely increasing training load. See you in the next lesson.